Are you tired of mealtimes being a battlefield in your household?
Then come along so we can share some tips on how to conquer this battle.
Hey mamas, welcome back to our channel. Today we're going to be giving you some pointers on how to build healthy eating habits with your kids. Now, we come from a household where, to me, it is super important that the kids eat whatever they are served, that they eat healthy, balanced meals. We also do foster care, so we have had lots of battles when it comes to eating because the kids that have come into our household are used to like goldfish and like popsicles being served for dinner. So you can imagine going from that to going to like a meat and a starch and then like at least 2 servings of vegetables like on a dinner plate at every meal has been a fight. So we've been through this.
And I just have 4 kids that eat really well, but I can tell you it took a lot of training to get to where we are. And a lot of people will say, wow, what in the world did you do for them to eat like this? So let's share these tips.
Something I think that is super important, not only for helping your kids to develop healthy attitudes about meal times and about food, but also just like healthy for the family in general, is to eat dinner together at the dinner table.
It's a good time to be example for your kids because they can actually see what you're eating, seeing that you're trying all these new foods and that you're not whining or complaining about them. This is also a really good time to teach your kids about nutrition, especially if you're doing it throughout the different meals. Then they see that it's a lifestyle and that you're enforcing it and that it's part of your actual day-to-day life.
And you can talk about how all the different foods benefit your bodies. So for example, if you're eating carrots, you can talk about how the beta carotene in carrots is really good for your eyes and how it can help you prevent eye disease as you grow older. Or you can talk about how protein helps you build strong muscles.
And again, these are really good conversations to include as part of your life so that when you're talking about it, they're not like, why are you bringing this up? You've never brought it up before.
And on the flip side of that, you can also talk about how candies and sugars also affect your body in a negative way, how they can make you sluggish, and how they're just super addicting, and how these other things are a better choice for your bodies. Of course, this applies to when your kids are older, because if they're like 2 when you're trying to explain this to them, it won't make a difference, so gauge it on the age of your child. Another reason why eating together is important is because they need to know that there are designated meal times. If there's not and everyone just kind of like eats and snacks throughout the day, then when it comes to mealtime, if your kid is like all filled up on like goldfish or granola bars or whatever they're eating throughout the day, then of course you're going to have a battle because they're already full. So if you just tell them, okay, the kitchen is open during breakfast, lunch, dinner, and you can even have designated snack times. So like at 10 o'clock, you're allowed to pick a fruit or a vegetable. And then like at 3 o'clock when you get home from school, you can choose like a cheese stick or a yogurt. But outside of these times, the kitchen is closed, and give enough time for them to be hungry after their snack before their next meal.
And oftentimes I hear this argument that if I control what they eat now, when they get older, they're going to eat whatever they want. And I think that is far from the truth. Because again, our oldest is 11, then we have a 9-year-old, a 6-year-old. And I think that we are at the place where all the way down to 6, we let them make their own decisions. So 3 out of our 4 kids make their own decisions when we go to parties, when we go to events, where there are foods that, you know, are not as good for our body. And that's okay, they can still have it, but they are the ones that can control the portion. And so I see it in their day-to-day life that they make these decisions without me having to tell them what's good and what's bad. So that should not be a concern on them getting older and just doing whatever they want because, again, they are making the decisions on their own currently.
And if you do want them to still like have the choice, just make sure you're not buying junk food in the house. Make sure you're stocked up on fruits and vegetables and try to buy healthier snacks like trail mix or Lara bars. Or if they're not like a super huge fan of fruits and vegetables to begin with, you can sort of ease them in by also offering them dips. So like my kids love to dip carrots and like celery in ranch dressing, or they like to eat apples with peanut butter. So that's a good way to sort of segue them into eating the healthier snacks. Or you can dip celery in like hummus. Some other options are cheese sticks, cottage cheese, yogurt, just plain nuts, raisins. We also really like to make homemade fiber balls in our house. They're also called energy balls. You can look up a recipe for them. They're really yummy and they're kind of like a homemade alternative to granola bars, and the kids in our house love it.
And I actually love making all these types of power balls because they have no sugar added, and that's always a plus in our house.
Another tip for kids who don't really like fruits and vegetables is to put them together in a smoothie. Kids tend to like these. It's a good way to get them to eat their fruits and veggies without them knowing it in the beginning. But the point is to celebrate when they're eating it so they know that it's a good thing. So I wouldn't recommend always trying to like hide the fruits and vegetables in there. You really want the kids to know that they're eating it and for them to be excited and proud of themselves for making good decisions.
And I want to add, as we're discussing all this, that it's really important that, again, you're consistent. Because it's not like we tried this, for a week and all of a sudden I had these amazing eaters that tasted everything. It is definitely a battle, but it's a battle that I choose to fight, knowing that, again, in the end, they are aware of healthy eating and they are ready to make good choices.
Side note for you mamas with babies, with my little ones, I always started them off not with like banana baby food or like one of those like really yummy sweet fruits. I always started them off with green beans or peas or a vegetable so that they develop that palate first, because if you give them like the bananas in the beginning and then you try to introduce the other stuff that might not be as tasty, they're going to spit it out and they're going to give you more of a headache. So just always start with the vegetables.
When it comes to them eating with their little fingers, it's really important that they try new foods. And again, even if they're battling it out. So here's an example. Chili was a big one. For some reason, none of the kids in our family like the chili. And I think it's because of the shell on the bean that kind of just didn't give them the right texture in their mouth. So all of them had issues with it when they were little. Like I'm talking about 13, 14 months. And they all would really struggle to happily eat it. And so what I would start doing is having them have a bite of it. And then I would give them a little oyster next. And so you could always train them to eat healthy with something that's not as healthy. But in the long run, like now we sit down and eat chili with no issue and no oysters because they're not needed anymore. And it's the same with a lot of other main courses that contain a lot of vegetables. Like minestrone soup is another one that has tons of vegetables in it. Nobody's ever a fan over it when they are little, but again, we try to give them a piece of garlic bread for every single bite. So they'll take a bite of minestrone soup, tiny little piece of garlic bread, another bite, and it just really trains their palate. So we even have huge discussions in our family about training your palate. I have one child who does not like mushrooms. That's my 6-year-old, and it's been 6 years of just trying it. Every single time she still needs to actually try it. And just recently this week, she's like, those mushrooms were really good. I thought I didn't like them, but I think my palate is starting to like them. And I was like, yes!
Something we try to emphasize in our house is our kids are not allowed to say they do not like a food. They can say the term, it's not my favorite, but we always tell them not to say they dislike something because your palate can change over the years. You can train yourself to like different foods. I know for me personally, I was super picky growing up just because of the things that I was fed as a child. And now like I eat everything and I love tasting new things. And so we try to train them to not use those words.
Yes, and so even the things that I don't like, I try to be an example to them. They know the 2 things I don't like and I still eat them, and I re-emphasize, guys, remember, what are the 2 things mommy doesn't like to eat? But notice I'm still eating them. So I want them to see that just because I don't like it, it's okay. The reason we eat it is to survive, and I want them to get that point across, that at times they might visit a third world country and they might be eating some food that, again, they're not okay with the texture, but I really want them to get to the place where they are grateful for it and they're willing to eat it because it's nurturing their bodies, not because, oh, this is the best food ever. That's okay. And if you meal plan, make sure to involve the kids in actually deciding what the breakfast, lunches, and dinners are for the week. I think it really makes them feel heard when all their options end up being on the menu.
And also, when it comes time to eat, if they like fight you on the meal and say like, I don't want to eat this, you can gently remind them like, hey, you guys picked this. Remember, we all agreed on this as a family, so this is what we have for the night.
It kind of reminds me of when the kids are younger and I used to say, guys, what do you want to eat for dinner this week? And of course, I got the regular responses, which are chicken nuggets, mac and cheese, and pizza. And I would say, okay, we could pick one of those. Here are other options. You can work with answers when they give you things that aren't so healthy, but you do have to kind of stir them in the right direction.
Along with involving them in your meal planning, make sure you also involve them in the kitchen when you're cooking. It gives them a feeling of like ownership over their food. And then when they're sitting down at the table, they're so proud that they made it. They're more excited to eat it.
Yes, starting with even, again, a 1.5-year-old, when you give them the little kid's knife, and we encourage cucumbers, that's an easy one that they can cut and eat. Even peppers is another good one that they can actually chop up and eat. And it really encourages them to have their veggies. Speaking of veggies, I didn't like them growing up, and that's because I wasn't really trained to actually practice tasting them. And so the few times that I actually was served vegetables was usually with my warm meal at school, and oftentimes they were just steamed and they tasted so bad like mush. And I know some people enjoy them. I think you guys are one of the families that enjoy them steamed. But the point is, if your child is not enjoying these steamed vegetables, they get to the place where they become a little more picky. I would highly encourage you to roast them, add some salt, garlic powder on them, and it just takes them to a whole nother level. I feel like once I was introduced to roasting vegetables, I seriously fell head over heels in love with veggies. This also reminds me of one of the times I was at a friend's house and she told me that her children don't eat bell peppers. We were having like little roll-ups, and on the side I would do bell peppers as their vegetable. And when she said they don't eat them, I was like, hey, have you tried them with salt? Like my kids didn't eat them. I didn't eat them for years and years and years. And we tried it with salt, and seriously, to my surprise, she still to this day is like, I still can't believe that just adding salt on these bell peppers made them eat it. I'm telling you, salt and seasoning can go a really, really long way.
In my household, we have the rule that they eat what is served. This is for multiple reasons. Number one is for my sanity, so I don't have to cook multiple meals for everybody who doesn't like what they're being served. Another reason is because if we go over someone's house, I want to make sure that they don't like embarrass that person or embarrass us. I'm like, oh, I don't like that. And another reason is because we want them to know that they're nourishing their bodies when they're eating. It's not always about eating what is delicious to you. It's more about eating what is healthy for you. If they really don't want to eat what is served, they can choose to forego that specific meal, but at the next snack or mealtime, they will be served that same bowl or plate, and they cannot move on to a different type of food until that bowl or plate is finished.
And I know this may sound harsh for some families, like, wait, you force them to eat it? Yes and no. So yes, as in they will be eating it whenever the next meal is, but no in terms of, I already said a few tips on how to help them eat it. And we also put a small enough portion, knowing that this is kind of the minimal that you should be tasting and basically filling your tummy with. So I don't want you guys to think this is like a full, huge portion and they're eating it for the next 3 meals. This is just enough to be like, I know so-and-so doesn't like this meal that much, but this is what they're expected to eat. And then of course, if they're still hungry, they can get more or they could be done for the night, since that's all we're offering.
If this seems a little too harsh for you, you can also offer them a piece of dry bread or something as an alternative, but just make sure it's something that's not particularly appetizing, because you want to make sure it's not like something they're enjoying over like whatever healthy thing you're giving them, and it needs to be like a no prep option. This is just so they don't go to bed hungry, if that sort of thing bothers you. Make sure when you do offer the piece of bread, make sure that it doesn't have like peanut butter or butter on it, because again, the point is not to make it like a desirable alternative. We may have already touched on this, but we want to reiterate that you should try your best not to have like unhealthy options in the house for snacks. If you have candy and like junk food and chips as an option for them to snack on, they will never choose the fruit and the veggies. Like even my kids, who have been trained from a very young age to eat healthy and to make healthy choices, they would still most likely go for like the ice cream and the popsicles and the candy. It's just what a kid is going to do. But if you don't have it in the house as an option, then they can't choose it. And honestly, when we don't have candy in the house for a long time, they don't even think about it. They don't ask for it because it's just not on their minds. Whereas if it's in the house, the more they eat it, the more addicted they become, and they just need it more and more. And even as an adult, I'm like that too. Like I crave sugar all the time. Around Halloween, we have candy in the house, so I'm like eating and I just eat more and more. And once that Halloween candy is gone and I do not let us buy more of it, then we will go until the next Halloween season without eating any candy.
And some of you have wonderful husbands like mine who just need a dose of Doritos or some kind of chips, and you have to have it in the house. But honestly, as long as you can actually say no and be consistent with your no and make sure that it's out of reach, if you have kids that can reach it, I think you're totally fine. I think the biggest concern is when you cannot say no, or you often tend to say yes, then it's easier just not to buy it and not have it available at all.
It's easier to resist the temptation if the temptation is not there.
As we're talking about junk food and candy and chocolate, I want to mention, if you haven't done any research on sugar and like MSG, the addiction of them both, I would highly recommend that you look it up. For me, it was really, really eye-opening once I saw what they compare sugar to, and I won't give it away because I want to do a huge series on eating healthy, but there is an article out there on comparing sugar to a drug, I will tell you that. And for me, it was so eye-opening that I was like, you know what, we're going sugar-free, we're going to switch to honey and just different natural alternatives for sweetening foods.
I will say that she is way farther ahead than me on this like healthy eating journey. We have not eliminated sugars from our household. We don't have candy in our house, but I love dessert. So we probably do dessert like twice a week at least. And I really like baking and like lemon bars and chocolate chip cookies and ice cream. I could eat ice cream every night. So our goal is to become sugar-free, to like make sure we check our labels on our food and don't buy food that has like the MSG and the sugars and all of that stuff in there. But we're not quite there yet.
And speaking of lemon bars, we actually just made these amazing lemon bars with no sugar added. I was so excited about it.
I feel a little bit less guilty about eating the desserts because we eat so healthy otherwise throughout the day, because we eat like multiple servings of veggies and fruits, and we don't add in like chips or like unhealthy like fillers throughout the day. So it makes me feel a little bit better about eating the desserts, but I know we can be better at it. And she has a quote that I really like.
My 95%?
Yes.
That's what I was going to jump in next. So I always say aim for 95% of the time eating healthy, and then honestly, you can still have a treat. You can still have your ramen noodle or whatever else you enjoy as the 5%. It's the same with the clean house. I always say aim for 95% of the time. The goal is not perfection. The goal is just to have this high standard so that when you enjoy it the 5%, you already know that you're working really hard the other 95% to eat healthy.
And you can also play around with recipes. You don't want them to have this relationship with food where they're just like eating it to survive. Like, yeah, that's a part of it, but you want them to enjoy eating. It's an enjoyable experience for us. And so in the beginning, I didn't really know how to cook healthy. So like my idea of healthy was, like she said, just like steamed vegetables, like, you know, non-flavored chicken. I just thought to eat healthy, you had to eat like no flavor, and it just wasn't good. Yeah. And now I've discovered how to cook in a way that's healthy and like super delicious. I have lots of family members that come to visit us that like refuse to eat anything green or eat any vegetables when they're at home. One of them being my dad, and he comes over and I am one of the only people who will cook something with vegetables in it and he will still eat it. So to me, that's a pretty big accomplishment, and it makes me feel like I've finally gotten to the point where I can cook healthy and it's still delicious. So those are all of our major tips. Hopefully this helps lead you in the direction to help your kids build healthier eating habits. In our households, it's really helped us to avoid battles with our kids at the dinner table. If you have any really good methods to share with us that work in your home, please drop them down in the comments section below.
And don't forget to hit like and subscribe. That really, really supports us. See you guys next time.